Hey, Gavin.
Hey, Louie. How are ya?
I'm good. You're just my little ready Randy Rainbow, huh?
No, please don't call me that. That's not what my driver's license says.
I mean, that's not what the paperwork I got says. I have eyes everywhere, babe. Okay? I know the truth. Derek's mom loves Randy Rainbow. And I think that's his core audience, honestly. It's moms.
That probably is. That checks.
You know, speaking of moms and mom allies, I went to Long Island Pride this weekend, and mostly moms. And you know what? I liked it. I was like, am I at my favorite Pride event of the year? Maybe.
It is a common knowledge that you're very much a momasexual. Everybody knows that.
Oh, yeah.
Words
I do
on
great
the
with
street.
moms. Do great with moms. Hi, everyone with the mixed reviews.
We're a film podcast where we take a film subject, such as an actor, director, or a mini genre, and we take a look back at the history, and then we say, hey, I like this stuff, and hey, I don't like this stuff.
You say, what's going on here?
Yep. What's happening?
I need to investigate
What are
this.
those? Yeah.
Oh man,
We do that.
Talk about old memes. I think I tried to do a "What are those?" to someone recently, and they were like, "What are you doing?" I was like,
Yeah. By the time it was in the movie Black Panther, I was already like, oh, that's old, Marvel.
Yeah. when they wrote that, it was they thought, wow, topical humor. Love that.
Fresh and poppin'.
Gavin, let's really quickly talk about some fun, exciting things happening for this glorious month of Pride. This month, we are not doing a Pride-themed episode, but...
This is a lightly Pride-themed episode, and I'll get to that in a moment. But,
okay.
Yeah.
But in its stead of a formal Pride episode, you challenged me. You took me to task, if you will.
I nagged you. I nagged you pretty hard.
Yeah, you really did. And I was like, okay, I'm being harassed. I'm calling the Trevor Project. But I created for us and our wonderful listeners the first of hopefully a series. I'm working on the second one right now. It's a little more harder than I anticipated. But if you see us on Twitter or on Instagram, or if you go over to our Redbubble page, we have a new design up. It's based off of one of the movies that we discussed in our Drag on Film episode. It's Just One of the Guys, and I made it into Just One of the Gays with you and me as the main characters. I think it's really funny, really cute. Yeah, if you guys want some of that, you can go over there and check it out. Retweet, reblog, like, fave, subscribe, all the fun, good things.
Oh, but more importantly, buy one. We'd love for you to buy one.
I forget. Yeah, I sometimes forget. I'm just like so out of capitalism, you know, like about me specifically, as I'm literally wearing our shirt.
Yeah, Louis, if he could, would buy every one of the shirts and just hand them out to the people. He's the Ava Perón of this podcast.
We have a guest with us today.
We do have a guest.
And we have more guests to come. So I just want to make it very clear to our listeners that even though we don't have a formal Pride episode, we have a lot of fun and very Pride-filled things for you this month and coming soon. I
would like to think that our podcast is Pride all year round. You know,
you're not wrong.
Every episode,
every
episode you listen to, you're just getting a little Pride from us.
Oh. I mean, and the occasional shame, I will say, pride and shame, you know.
And shame.
Those are sisters. They belong together. But I think we've held our guest in suspense long enough.
We certainly have.
Please welcome to the stage, it's Morgan Roberts. Hi, girl.
Morgan Roberts. Hello. So, Morgan, you are from the Untitled Cinema Gals Project, which is a glorious podcast that you host with our good friend Chels, who we did our Audrey Hepburn episode with. I don't know why that took me a second to think, because honestly, at this point in my brain, Audrey Hepburn and Chels are like one.
Yeah, they really are one and the same.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on. We're so happy to talk to you. We love talking to other film people.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that you invited me, and that when you gave me a list of people, I said, I would like not that and to do something completely different.
I love that. You have no idea how much I actually live for that. I think most people would be sort of intimidated by that, but I want... When I invite people on, or when people ask to come on, I love it when they're passionate. Like, I don't want somebody to come on. I have a friend I've been trying to get on for a really long time. She's a professional film critic. She's really, really great. And she keeps being like, can you just pick someone? And it's like, no, like, please pick somebody. So
I think that's like half the fun of it, though. Like, I'm going to be straight up and honest. Like, when Gavin came to me with this subject, I was like, "Hoopst and what?" I think that speaks to me and my basicness, first of all. But also, like, I was like, oh, yeah, I've seen one of her films, and I want to, like, keep going down this rabbit hole and learning something new, and, like, and just, like, kind of expand my horizons, my cinematic horizons. And so I was very excited to do this episode, so thank you for bringing this subject to us. Before we get to it, our last episode, we talked about the iconic Glenn Close.
Face.
What
Teeth,
a fun
nose,
episode.
Face.
Yeah. Hair, body, face.
Yeah. Okay. So give me 1 second and keep talking amongst yourselves because I have a surprise for you then.
Oh!
We love a surprise.
Oh my God. I'm like shaking, quaking. What if Glenn Close comes out?
By the way, this is my mom.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know this, but my mom is Glenn Close.
Glenn Close. I took the last name of my godmother, Julia Roberts, and
So this is a picture I have of Glenn Close that hangs in my bedroom because my friend gave it to me for Christmas.
amazing.
Look at her, just lounging.
Mm-hmm. She got it from someone who was a professional photographer. And so she and I will be listening to that episode.
Oh, it's listen, I don't want to talk myself up or talk us up and be like, oh, we're so full of ourselves. But honestly, great episode. So
Great
good.
episode.
We did a great job.
That's incredible that you pray to your Lord Glenn Close every night before you go into bed.
Absolutely.
And that segues perfectly into our old business with we asked you guys to go online and vote for your favorite Glenn Close performance. The results are in. I think this might be the first time we got 0% on other. There is not a single vote for other, which this means that the fans were ravenous for the other three. My pick, 101 Dalmatians, came in at 24%. Fatal Attraction came in with 26%, but Dangerous Liaisons just stomped on all the dicks with 51%, coming out on top. And, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I'll be honest, between the three of those choices, there's genuinely no wrong answer. It is absolutely like unparalleled what Glenn Close is able to do. Yeah. Especially with those three characters, and could not be more different characters.
The range,
absolutely. But thank you, everybody. I do want to point out Brittany Vanderhoof wrote in to say, not my favorite performance, but I appreciate a world where Glenn Close is the VP in Air Force One. And honestly, same.
Yeah. Morgan, do you have a Glenn Close? I know you just surprised us with that glorious piece of art. Do you have a Glenn Close fave pick for a movie?
So I'd probably have to go with her very zany, very small role in Mars Attacks because I used to watch that all the time. And to have that be my introduction to Glenn Close before 101 Dalmatians, I feel like that's something.
Yeah. What a joy. What a true treat.
As we mentioned in the episode too, she's very politically left-leaning person. So for her to get the opportunity to sort of like send up the Nancy Reagans of the world, it's a very on-point performance.
I just can't believe she chopped off her head for the role. It's incredible.
Yeah. How did that happen?
But thank you, Glenn. We bow in honor and in your light. But we are moving right along. Morgan, please tell our listeners why you have brought us here today. What are we talking about?
So today we are going to be talking about the late filmmaker, Lynn Shelton. She is known both for her film and television.
She's a director of all medium.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's true. She's somebody who managed to really go back and forth between the world of television and film sort of seamlessly, and in a way that I think a lot of people, I think it is a little more common now. And this is the thing, is we are talking about a contemporary filmmaker who has unfortunately passed, but I do think it's easier now to sort of go back and forth between the two. But she always seemed to make it look effortless, and I'm not quite sure how she pulled it off. But I have to say it's really impressive. And one of the things that I kept running into is she would constantly mention when you're doing TV, it's a much different thing. It's really a writer's,
right.
it's really a writer's area and you're just fulfilling somebody else's vision. But I think she was able to imbue the stuff that she did with her own sense of style, even if it was working as something as strict and rigid as, I don't know, as the Mad Men's of the world, or something as more loosey-goosey as like the Mindy Project.
Yeah, for sure. Morgan, what brought you to Lynn? Like, what is your connection to her? Why did you want to talk about her?
So my first Lynn Shelton film is kind of like right in the middle of her film career, Your Sister's Sister. And I have always been like a really big fan of the Sundance Film Festival. So like I used to pay attention to it. I'd pick 3 movies. I'd follow them throughout the year until they finally were released, you know, because I was super cool and well liked in school. And Your Sister's Sister was definitely one that I was like, yes, I have to watch this. And I remember watching it being both in awe at how simple and yet magical it was. And I followed her career ever since then, and she is my favorite filmmaker. So
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got someone very special with us today on the pod.
I do have to ask, and like honestly, if it's too personal, you don't have to answer, but you know, inquiring minds want to know. What is it about her work that draws you in?
I think so. It's something that she kind of talks about and then almost walks the walk with, is she's very interested in people, and in a way that's not like, look at these flawed people that we can love in spite of them. It's just like, look at these people who are beautiful. Their mess is beautiful. Their perfections are beautiful. All of those things existing at the same time is beautiful. And I think all of her films really kind of make you feel very hopeful about people. And I really just enjoy work that kind of has the quote unquote religious experience where you have faith in people, which, you know, like Fleabag is a show that I love because at the end of the day, she has faith in people and humans. And all of Lynn's work was so much about people, and that every single person, no matter how mundane they might appear on the outside, is very special.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's really lovely.
I had seen Hump Day before, and I had seen Laggies for our Sam Rockwell episode before. I did not make the connection that they was the same filmmaker, but I definitely, like, now going through, I was like, oh, this style I certainly recognize, and I like her point of view is so clear. She definitely feels like a filmmaker that is like in the trenches of the war of making film, you know, like it's so personal, so intimate. And it feels like, I mean, I don't know this woman, but I feel like through her movies, you really get a sense of kind of what you're saying. She was so interested in these, like, because truly a lot of her subjects or her characters do feel kind of very plain, you know, and going through life when these, like, not quite dramatic, not quite comedic, weird. I guess mumblecore is the genre that is often. I don't know what the fuck that means.
I do, and I will say I normally don't really care for it that much. I'm very much of the thought process that, and maybe that's because I'm an editor, which is interesting because Lynn Shelton also started as an editor, so yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm very much of the school that. Film is a visual medium, and I think a lot of mumblecore tends to feel like almost watching a filmed play and doesn't justify itself as a film. I don't think that's true with Lynn. I'll be perfectly honest. I think Miss Shelton's work really does show itself off as film. I think she's sometimes able to capture in the medium something that most people aren't able to do, which is to actually film the unfilmable, which is people's emotions, their insides, the things that make them who they are, their wants and their needs. And she's able to visualize that through her actors' performances, through the way that she commands the camera, and through her shot selection in the edit room. And I think it's really fascinating because perhaps had we not done this episode, I would not give her the credit that I truly now think that she deserves, which is unfortunate because there is something about that portmanteau of mumblecore that I hate and drives me crazy. Like, I'm not a fan really of the Duplass brothers films. I don't mind them as actors, but they're just not my thing. And she does something so different and so interesting in comparison to what they do. I don't know. I don't want to pit this as like Lynn Shelton versus them, but I don't know. I was really fascinated.
But they're fighting.
Yeah, they're fighting. They're no longer friends. But yeah, and I think it's a really interesting thing that I personally maybe wouldn't have picked up on without you coming on the show, Morgan, to educate us.
I had listened to many a podcast with Lynn Shelton and about Lynn Shelton. So I think one of the things about her though is that there is kind of like this very quiet genius, because she was someone who, there was an interview I saw with John Hamm after her death that he was like, she came onto set of Mad Men, like middle of season 4. I'm just like doing my thing. And she goes, isn't it so amazing that we get to make TV today? I'm so excited to be here. And he was like, I left and it was like a religious experience. And she was someone who made you feel free enough to do whatever you wanted, but she had an exact vision. So, not to get into a film, but in Your Sister's Sister, there's a dinner scene, and she wanted Emily Blunt to get really embarrassed. So she went up to Rosemary DeWitt, said, I would like for you to say the most embarrassing thing that has happened to you or someone you know. And Rosemary DeWitt was like, got this. And she said a very cringeworthy, like, anecdote. And after she passed, Emily Blunt brought it up. She was like, my vein popped in my forehead. I was so embarrassed. And it wasn't even my actual story. Right. So I think that someone that directs in a way that says, look, I'm giving you some freedom, but I know exactly what I want, is such an amazing balance to hold.
Yeah, totally. Well, Gavin, what if we learn a little bit more about Miss Shelton and get into our rewind?
Lynn Shelton was born August 27th, 1965, which only made her 54 years of age before she passed away, which is very much too young. She was born in Oberlin, Ohio, and raised in Seattle, Washington. She described herself as having been audacious as a young girl, but having lost confidence in her creativity in adolescence. Part of this, I think, maybe comes from the fact that her parents split up when she was younger. And it's funny, I was watching an interview with her where she was like, I'd like to think, when I looked back, that I was the kid that was like, okay, like they're splitting up. That's what they're doing. And I realized that I was kind of a monster about it.
And then in retrospect, I found out recently that I was kind of a little shit. And when we moved into this new house, or it was the first time maybe that my stepdad moved in with us, I drew a map. I don't remember this, but I supposedly presented my parents, my mom and stepdad, with a map of where they were allowed in the house to kiss. Shit like that.
Wow.
Director.
Yeah. Yes. This is a no kissing zone, actually.
Yeah, please. Exactly. Please, tongues in your own mouths. Shelton attended Garfield High School, and after high school, she attended Oberlin College in Ohio, and then the University of Washington School of Drama. She then moved to New York and followed the Masters of Fine Arts program in photography and related media in the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. In a way, she kind of wanted to be an actor for a bit. And then she realized, like, this is not for me.
I would hide behind my telephoto lens of my Pentax 2000, and I would K1000, and I would find these ways in. I would capture these intimate moments of vulnerability, across the gym with some guy, and so it was the safe place to be. But I was still always looking for connection, like we always are. Right? Yeah. But between that and then the acting, which enabled me to just like become somebody else and not worry, I was very self-conscious. And so there was really a period of time when all I really could do was act because somebody else was telling, it was like I was a puppet.
She fully was somebody who saw the profession, realized what it took to get into that profession, and realized that wasn't what interested her. She wanted to be somewhat behind the scenes. She loved... Someone is dead.
Someone has died.
R.I.P. them.
she loved photography. She said as a kid, she was always that girl that was wandering around, snapping pictures of people, trying to get them in a more private moment. And that's not necessarily something you can get at as an actor. I mean, there's ways to portray that, but it's a much more internal feeling, I feel like, than putting it out there on the stage. So that's why she ended up going for her master's in photography. And during this time, she also started getting into the film industry, working as a film editor. And she would make a series of experimental short films. And these experimental pieces become sort of the basis of her later works, her fiction works, because she would create them with what you could describe as like an anthropological sort of study. Like they're more internal. Once again, I'm just going to keep saying internal. You're just going to have to keep coming with me deeper and deeper inward. And they would, they'd be more about what was going on inside than they were necessarily about, what is actually happening on screen. It's funny because I found in this process, and I emailed you guys about it because it is on YouTube, a short documentary she did. It's actually one of the last things she did before moving into a much more narrative-based filmmaking style. This short documentary is called The Clouds That Touched Us Out of Clear Skies. It was made in 2000, and it is a short experimental documentary. As I said, you can find it on YouTube, you can find it on Vimeo, about miscarriages. And it's set to these impressionistic images. And it's all these women talking about this very personal experience they've had, set to these beautiful moments of like leaves or nails or hands taking petals off of things. And it's actually the subject matter is obviously very heavy, but it's quite a beautiful experience to watch. I don't know if either of you got a chance to check that out.
I did. And I think the person who had uploaded it onto YouTube is someone who actually worked with Lynn a lot in Seattle. But I found it really interesting in the fact that she uses those images, and like you're not seeing a whole bunch of people, like you're seeing hands lighting candles and stuff like that. And it's such an interesting way of being able to say, like, this could be anyone, because I think that miscarriage, pregnancy loss, infant loss is such a taboo thing, even though 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. And it's very interesting how she was very willing to talk about that 20 years before an Oscar-nominated performance covered that exact same thing.
Yeah,
right. And I mean, as someone who was an actor, like she loved people, and that kind of came out in those experimental shorts as well.
I love that you mentioned that, because that to me was the most brilliant thing about it. Is we as a society sort of place such a stigma on being able to talk about something like child loss, and yet it is something that, assigned female at birth women and men go through. And it is, I don't know, I found it amazing that even at such a young age, her brain and her heart were filled with such compassion. Because like I said, it's a heavy subject. It's not the easiest thing to get to. You're literally listening to people talk about losing a child, and in graphic detail.
I was completely unprepared for the pain. I had been planning for a natural childbirth at home. I read all these books, and I had become overconfident. I really thought to myself, I do yoga, I know how to breathe, I'll be fine.
But it's such a cathartic experience, because it feels like you're able to get that some of their pain out of them and out of you at the same time. I don't know. I found it fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And I was like, man, I almost wish she'd made more experimental stuff, like more, but there's no market for it. I get it.
What it feels like, I mean, going through her career, she kind of like, I was reading up a story that she had, it was for the New York Times. She did an interview, And she kind of was like, because wasn't there a time where she went to go do like a bigger movie and she was like, fuck, I really want to go back to doing like literally no money, shitty cameras, and just like cool people and like working to me it seems, and I don't mean this to sound like no one else is a real fucking artist, not like Lynn. I don't mean for it to sound like that, but I think for her, it's not so much of like, I want to be a director, filmmaker in Hollywood and be that person. It really sounds like she just loved creating and being an artist. She put the artist before directing.
Yeah.
Where I think, even though there are plenty of directors out there who I would consider an artist, I think they put the directing first. Mm-hmm. She is more interested in like truth telling. A lot of her work, I would say almost all of it, is just like she wants the extreme realism. She wants to work with the actors in crafting the story and like wanting to get it really deep in there. She's not behind the camera just like calling cut and action. She is like, let's work together and we're making this little like art project together.
I do it an upside down way where I'm sort of developing the script alongside the development of the characters, because I want to know who the characters are. I have to know who the characters are before I can believably, write what they would believably do in a scene, what they would say, how they would act. And the more you know about the characters, the easier it is to write what they would do, because it's like then you can just sort of improvise the scene out in your head because you know who they are.
Right.
But, I don't like to throw people into an improv situation when I don't have any of that stuff.
It's funny that you would say that too. And we're going to get to this actually much, much further into this podcast episode. But she actually ended up having to turn down some work because she was like, no, ma'am. Like, what is this? What is this nonsense?
She's like, Marvel, please. Ugh.
Yeah, exactly. But why don't we get actually into her career? So this is the thing that I think most people don't realize about Lynn Shelton. She had wanted to be a director, but she was already in her mid-30s, and she was like, it's too late. It's never going to happen. And then she saw Claire Denis at Seattle's Northwest Film Forum in 2003.
For independent film in particular, I found that I would go to these festivals, and all of my peers were usually men, usually white, and they were usually often under 25. I mean, young men. Claire Denis came to Seattle. She's a film director who's French, and she, as I found out, she had made it up to that point, I think 6 or 8 films, all of them beautiful, highly regarded, Cannes films. And I found out in this onstage talk that she was doing that she didn't make her first feature till she was 40. And she had spent 20 years, she started as an assistant director to Francois Truffaut at the age of 20, and had continued to work in the crews of other people's movies, but didn't actually write and direct her first feature till 40. And I remember thinking, oh my God, okay, I have, it was like 3 years left or something, 4 years left. But I can do this, I can still have a career.
In 2004, she began writing and directing her first feature film, We Go Way Back. It depicts a 23-year-old actress named Kate who's confronted by her 13-year-old self. It's sort of impressionistic. It starts off with her reading letters that she wrote to herself and being like, oh, if you read this 10 years down the line, but she actually ends up having an experience where she runs into her younger self. She sort of runs away and
right.
Basically starts to interact with her younger self. It ended up premiering at Slam Dance in 2006. Did either of you get a chance to watch We Go Way Back?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And I almost wish she did more weird stuff in her career, too. I love this idea of being able to confront your younger self, to have your younger self confront you. And I thought it was really beautiful to have that sort of metaphor be realized as something much less otherworldly, much more common. It wasn't like she was like, a ghost, it's younger me or anything. Yeah. It was just like, well, this is happening. Guess I got to deal with it and got to go along with it. And I love that aspect of it. Also, I found this movie fucking hilarious. I thought all of the stuff with the Hedda Gabler play was really fucking funny. And what makes it even better is one of her editing jobs prior to this was editing a film version of Hedda Gabler. So I like all I could think of was like, oh, she's drawing on some real life experiences here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All I could think of when I watched this movie was Lynn Shelton thinks art is actually stupid. And like, cause I connected mostly with that stuff because it's just the sharpest, like, even though there were obviously these other personal parts with running into herself, it seems to me like this poor woman, Kate, who like, they just abuse, like, you know, make her fucking learn how to gabbler in, what is it, Danish or some shit.
So, what do you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Okay, listen. I've realized since I've been reading... Okay, I'm just going to come right out and say it. Kate, I need for you to learn Norwegian.
Norwegian?
At least well enough to do the play. Hedda must speak Ibsen's actual words.
Wow. Really? Norwegian production?
Well, actually, Hedda will be the only one who speaks the original text.
And then they're like, never mind. It's like... It feels like she's saying, you know, like, the gatekeepers of art are all stupid and, like, it doesn't matter. Like, just do whatever you want. And so I just thought it was really funny, especially because the entire movie in of itself is very, like, underground indie. And so, like, it could... Like, if I was to see the cover of We Go Way Back, I'd be like, oh, this is, like, indie nonsense. Yeah. But the movie itself is actually, like... shitting on, like, yeah, there is indie nonsense out there that is nonsense. Like, you don't have to be any type of way to appreciate art.
I find it very interesting that she chose that play too, because like it's really meant for like a much older woman.
Yes.
And I mean, it kind of is also like a tongue in cheek about how we try to age women, even though we still want them to be as young as humanly possible in Hollywood and in art. So like I found that really interesting, especially, and then as she like is confronted by her younger self of like her going like, oh, I guess I actually have more living. I'm 23. I thought I had everything. And so I just kind of find those layers of just like being added into the film super interesting.
I will say, like, I didn't, like, you know, did I like watching this movie? Not really, but, like, I love the discourse of this movie. Like, because there are so many interesting things about this movie. And even, like, you know, she gets sexually assaulted in this movie. And it's, like, it's almost as if, you know, Lynn is saying so much with so little. She's like, this woman is abused as a worker and is taken advantage of. And look how easy that can, like, turn to being physically taken advantage of and sexually being taken advantage of. And kind of this woman in this industry that is not kind to women in the first place, you know, is kind of like broken by it and has to like really reflect on herself and looking to the future of like how to change things. So yeah, I just wanted to mention like she there's a lot here, especially for a first film. Yeah. It's kind of meaty.
My first feature, which is really about the way that we are different selves in different points in our lives. And the pre and post-adolescent selves were something I was looking back on and was like, wow, that was fascinating, because those were like polar opposite kind of personalities when I was in my late 30s. I was looking back at that. There's this thing that happens when you become sexualized for some girls, some women, a lot of them, where I just felt like I was the top of my game when I was like 12, 13. And I was writing stories, writing poetry, painting, playing music, acting, doing all this stuff and taking photographs. And had such a clarity of vision and a confidence in my voice. And, you know, and then, cut to like 20. That was like a gradual grinding down, I think, you know. And it wasn't anything to do with my folks. I was always told by both of them, you can do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. It was society, really, you know, and this kind of like I got really big boobs, and I was very like I felt, and I already had the tendency to be sort of self-conscious. No, that wasn't, I don't think I did. I was very androgynous and tomboy before. Then I felt sort of betrayed by my body and like, what the fuck, you know, that isn't who I am. And
it went underseen for a really long time. I don't think it actually ended up coming out to be available for rent in like a mass market until maybe Laggies came out. So, yeah. So like
it's on like the IFC channel if you have Amazon Prime or something.
I just rented it off of Amazon Prime. I was just like, I will pay my $2. You can have it.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos, go to the moon or whatever you're doing. In 2008, she released her second film, My Effortless Brilliance. It's a dark comedy about two friends sort of reconnecting with each other. I know, question mark. It's very low budge. It's very
low budge.
Yeah, it's like shot on video. I mean, one of the actors is the lead singer of Harvey Danger, who I thought was great in the movie. I'll be honest. I don't want to make that sound like a pejorative, but it's I liked it. Like I said, I ended up liking more of these movies than disliking. And I do want to mention that the thing I think is interesting, and I don't want to just compare her to another female filmmaker, but this film actually reminded me a lot of Kelly Reichardt's Old Joy. And I think what's interesting about comparing the two is I do think when you have a woman writing about friendship of men, it's always slightly more deeper than I think most men are willing to go in an introspective portion. And Old Joy, it seems to me that the relationship between these two men, it's much more clearly queer in some way, but this also felt a little like, because it got so introspective, I was kind of like, what if they just fucking kissed? I was like, if they kissed, maybe they'd be okay. But no, I don't think so. But I was like, I kept getting like a weird, like the vibes from it. I was like, huh. What is going on here? The
vibes are just weird. This movie, I think, is very weird. It's funny, but like in a sad way.
Yeah, it's very sad. I will also admit it's sad.
Like, I think she does have like this fascination with like men and like the question, are straight men okay? And and like, again, this movie kind of follows up like art is stupid and artists are sometimes assholes. And like this main guy is like this asshole writer who is just like, he's essentially that guy you run into all the time who's like, oh, you haven't been to Mykonos?
Right.
That's this guy, except it's like, oh, you haven't read my second book?
His character really reminded me of, actually, and this is another comparison, but there's a great comic. It's 3 comics, and it's called Fonte Bukowski, and it's by Noah Van Schreiber, and he's really, really funny. He's both the artist and the author, and the main character is just this sort of unrepentant asshole who just thinks that everything he's written is brilliant, and I liked seeing that. I liked watching this movie and seeing that character in a slightly more realistic way, because the Fonte Bukowski books are a bit more extreme. Nobody could ever like this person, but I kind of started to like this guy the more that I understood him through the Lynn Shelton lens watching My Effortless Brilliance.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things too where it's like almost that Shakespearean comedy where it's like, oh, miscommunication, because like one person has a very different definition of what their relationship is than the other person. Yeah. And you know, it's funny and like very painful at the same time, because it's like, oh man, like I think everyone has at least one instance where they thought that they really were much closer with another person than the other person held in their mind. But yeah, she really does have, I really like that theme of, are straight men okay? And very frequently she's just saying no. And that's okay.
Literally no. I could not believe, like, it reminded me so much of my time in undergrad where, like, you just don't know who you are. And I just kept thinking, like, are these people, like, it feels like that energy, like, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I'm doing, of, like, your freshman year in college, but these people are, like, 38. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, and the idea of, like, I'm just going to crash at my not friend's place and get fucked up and then go hunt a cougar. Like, straight men aren't okay. They aren't okay.
I do have to ask before we jump into the next film, because I do think Are Straight Men Okay is the perfect bridge to the next film. But I rewatched the beginning of My Effortless Brilliance like 3 times because I was like, Did we ever figure out what the impetus of their fight is, these two men?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Literally, one of them just walks in and tells the other one he's a terrible friend.
I think you're a terrible friend. I know. I think you're an asshole. You've always been a total asshole.
I love that. Even if it made me go back and watch it a couple different times, I'm cool with not knowing.
It's the cask of Amontillado. Like, you don't know exactly why someone is about to wall up another person in a cellar, but like we're into that vibe and we're just gonna go with it.
Absolutely.
But you like understand why. Like, you don't know the particulars, but you're like, something has happened and I'm buying into it, especially because this writer guy is so like awful.
I was like, I would tell that guy he's not a good friend. But speaking of Are Straight Men Okay? Her next film, 2009's Hump Day. It premieres at Sundance. Magnolia Pictures buys it. It ends up getting showed at Cannes, SIFF, South by Southwest. And it's ends
kind
up
of a smash, right?
Yeah,
like it's her breakthrough.
It opens in New York and Seattle. Yeah, exactly what you just said. It's her breakthrough. It's a huge hit. It's Mark Duplass and Joshua Leonard, who play sort of slightly estranged friends. Again, Mark Duplass had just recently married, or I don't know how recent it is, but sometime within the last couple of years, Alicia Delmore's character, and Joshua Leonard shows up at their house to kind of crash. They Joshua Leonard's like this kind of free spirit, and he ends up at a party, and at this party they hear about this film festival The Stranger puts on every year. By the way, this is real. The Stranger actually does put on this film festival every year. And they decide that they're gonna make a porno together. And what makes it art, bear with me, folks, because I know we do have a queer audience, is that it's going to be two straight guys fucking each other. As if just 90% of gay porn isn't already built around that scenario.
Right. Just to be clear, the film festival is a porn film festival.
Yes. Yes.
And these kooky booky characters that they meet up with are like, oh my God, what? Like, we're going to apply. And they're like, we can do it too. I think the crazy, interesting thing about this movie is that the marriage between Mr. Duplass and his lovely wife seems wonderful. It seems like the perfect marriage. And I do not understand why he like... Straight men aren't okay. He's going off the deep end. He says, wait, am I boring now? Maybe I need to fuck my friend who haven't seen in 5 years.
Right. And I have issues with this. I do want to say one of the two women that Joshua Leonard meets at this party who are lesbian lovers are one of them is played by Lynn Shelton herself. And she gives my favorite performance in the movie. Every time she's on camera, I'm just like, why did she not act more?
Yeah, she's really good.
What I like about this film, though, and so I listened to a recent episode of Las Culturistas where B.D. Wong was on and talking about Mulan and how straight men, cisgender men have a really hard time with a spectrum experience. And like their experience has to be very binary. Where like, again, more cisgender normally labeled as straight women are like, yeah, I've had an experience with my friend. That's what spring break is for. So like,
you don't hear men being like, I went on spring break and kissed my buddy. Like,
like there's not. And so it's really interesting that she was like, but what if we forced men to try to figure out that this is more of a spectrum? Because, she is someone who has been open about having, experiences in the past with women and, understanding that love does not fall into a dichotomy, but is something that is very malleable and fluid. And I really like that she was like, let me find two very boring white dudes and make them try to kiss.
Yeah.
And they do kiss, right? I think that's the extent.
That's so. She said two things. One, I was definitely totally going to get to the like shy bisexual thing in 2012 in an interview with The Advocate. She did quote unquote come out as a shy bisexual. I did listen to a Fresh Air interview with her where she slightly David Bowie'd it by being like, oh, I don't know if I use those words exactly.
I don't remember saying shy bisexual. Maybe I did say that and I'm just blotting it out. It's not like I'm an active bisexual, but I've fallen for all stripes of human beings in this world, you know, and I've fallen for straight men, I've fallen for gay men, I've fallen for straight women and gay women. I really have, you know, had crushes on just every single kind of person in the world. And so, you know, there was this period of time in my life when I had this sort of romantic idea that everybody was like that, you know, that we're all human beings and that a person is a person, and if there weren't these sort of societal ideas about gender and sexual orientation, that, you know, anybody could fall in love with anybody. And it was really, you know, making Hump Day was the experience that really showed me that is so not true, you know, that some people really truly are straight. You know, there's a spectrum, and that there are people who are really at one or the other.
One of the things that we haven't really mentioned is part of Lynn Shelton's filmmaking style when it comes to actors is that she's very much into improv, but not sort of in the same way. If you listen to the show, you know, we did Christopher Guest, who's a filmmaker who deals almost solely in improv. This is very different. This is weeks worth of character building and really digging into people. She said, you know, one time she was asked about her approach to doing comedy. And she said, when we're on set, it's really essential that none of us, not the actors or myself either, think we're in a comedy, because that's when I find, especially with improvisation, you start reaching for jokes. You start sort of soft shoeing and try to entertain people. And I don't want that. I want us just always be playing to the truth of the scene. And I really have no idea how many laughs there are going to be. We're playing it so straight that it's really hard to tell the forest for the trees.
What I'm looking for is naturalism, an extreme level of naturalism, to the degree that, you know, it almost feels like a documentary, you know, that it just feels like real flesh and blood people having real conversations on screen. And I have found that incorporating improvisation to a certain degree really, really helps in that quest.
And I think that's very true with this movie specifically. I think there are points where you can kind of see them improving. And she said the most improv was they had nothing planned when they went to the hotel room. Mm-hmm. They knew that they were going to go to the hotel room, but she wanted to leave it up to both men to do the thing that they would feel comfortable with. And so she was sort of like, we genuinely didn't know what was going to happen in that hotel room. And I mean, I think that's interesting. I think that makes that finale much more interesting, whether you find it climactic or anticlimactic. I like the idea that they sort of had the power to determine which way this film was going to go. And yeah, and she handed it over to them.
What if like they showed up and like they fully just like go to Bone Town?
Oh yeah.
Should be like, well, I guess I'm submitting this to a different festival.
Yeah.
She's like, when is The Stranger holding a Hump Day festival? Like,
I feel like I watched this movie a long time ago, and I certainly was like waiting, hoping for them to like actually do it, and just like being like, okay, I'm ready. Yes, hello. But you know, I'm conflicted with Hump Day.
Yeah.
I do like the idea, because certainly like they even say like, even them like hugging without shirts on, they're kind of like trying to like rationalize to themselves, like, we're just wearing bathing suits and we haven't seen each other in a long time, so now we're hugging. And so like it's almost like she's trolling straight men with this movie. It's almost like she's like, yeah, you guys are fucking ridiculous, do you see this shit? Yeah, it's she's an interesting one for sure. But yeah. I just always felt really bad about like the poor wife, and like this whole idea that like, God, I'm so boring, and I was like, God, these the trauma, like what is going on? And this poor wife has to like admit, like she's like, well, I did kiss a guy once, so like I guess you could make this movie. I was like, what is happening? Oh.
In 2011, Your Sister's Sister premieres at the Toronto International Film Festival. This film stars Emily Blunt, Rosemarie DeWitt, and Mark Duplass again. And it explores, the situation between these two half-sisters, and also Mark Duplass's character, who is friends with Emily Blunt, and he's having a really hard time because his brother just passed away. So she suggests that he go up to her father's cabin? Mm-hmm. He go up to her father's cabin. There he runs into her sister, Rosemarie DeWitt, who is a lesbian but decides to sleep with him anyways, which you find out reasons later. Spoilers. And Emily Blunt arrives with the intention of telling Mark Duplass that she's actually in love with him. And so there's this love triangle that forms. Lynn Shelton once said, everybody has had that experience of going home for Thanksgiving and starting to act 10 years old again because they're in the same situation with their parents and their siblings. So you get to go back to this rut again of who you were when you were first becoming a grown-up. It's not until you get out of that you can break out of those bonds, but we still get trapped by them when we return. And I think that's very telling about this movie. I love the relationship between Emily Blunt and Rosemarie DeWitt. I love the stuff between Rosemarie DeWitt and Mark Duplass. I don't know if I love the stuff between Mark Duplass and Emily Blunt, but that's a whole other thing, which I do think is interesting, by the way. This movie originally was supposed to be Rachel Weisz, Emily Blunt, and Mark Duplass. Wow. Can you imagine actually if it was just the three women? No, but she was supposed to be playing the Rosemarie DeWitt role, and she'd spent months doing character work with them where they came up with backstories with everybody. And a week before filming, she had to drop out, and they called Rosemarie DeWitt to come in. I think she gives my favorite performance in the movie. I think she's like a breath of fresh air every time she's on screen.
My friend Jackie calls this movie the one where Rosemarie DeWitt tries to steal Mark Duplass's sperm. That's the tagline.
That's it. That's the...
I had never seen this movie before, and like when she sleeps with him, I was just like, is that something bisexual women just like to do once in a while? I fully was like, I was like, is this problematic? Like, how come every time there's a bisexual woman on stage, like she's always having to fuck a dude?
Turns out, nope. She wasn't into it really at all.
Also, I guess she's not bisexual. She's a lesbian. She was. So, and I was like, God,
Harold,
every movie...
she's a lesbian.
Yeah, every movie where there's like a lesbian woman, she has to end up fucking a guy, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then plot twist later, I'm like, oh.
Yeah,
okay.
You were like, Lynn Shelton knows this beat. She's no Kevin Smith. She knows.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I think the dynamic between the sisters is really fascinating and really deep and well thought through and well acted and presented on screen. And I just love I think what's really interesting about what Rosemarie DeWitt is doing and what Mark Duplass are doing when they're alone in a room together is you can see their armor, the stuff that you put on when you never met a person before, but you're trapped with them in a situation and you like kind of want to get to know them. And there's weakenings of that, he gets out the booze and they have a drink together. But I like that you can, in most films, the filmmaker wouldn't have the time to care about that, but I like seeing it. I like watching it work its way till they literally remove their clothes. They literally take their armor off and go to bed together. I don't know. To me, it's a really fascinating film.
I think that Emily Blunt kind of has the harder job because Rosemarie DeWitt and Mark Duplass are essentially two sides to the same coin, and she is the odd person out with both of them because she's someone who very much both wears her heart on her sleeve and then also makes sacrifices for other people. And I find that performance really interesting because, here she is catering to her older sister. Here she is trying to help her friend through an experience that she's never lived through. And at the same time, all of the things that she wants, she keeps putting on the back burner for other people's happiness. And I just find that dynamic really interesting because she's trying to fit in. Like that dinner scene table is both funny and painful again, because here is this person who is desperately in love with this man and also feels very much in this older sister's shadow and also slightly responsible for her older sister's trauma because they share the same father, but they have different mothers.
Yeah. And
I think it's some of Emily Blunt's best work, in my opinion.
No, I actually really agree. When I mentioned earlier that I don't love the Mark Duplass stuff with her, it's not on her end. If that's, that's just my opinion. I think
you're not a Duplass.
I just had a hard time with him as a romantic lead. That's all. That's her next film is 2013's Touchy Feely. It premieres also at Sundance again. It was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize. Returning Rosemarie DeWitt, also starring Allison Janney and Elliot Page. Touchy Feely, she said, was like sort of a return to like really personal stuff. She was really working out a lot of her own depression demons through the Rosemarie DeWitt character. At the same time, she was attempting to write another film with Josh Pius, who plays one of the leads. He plays Rosemarie DeWitt's brother.
Oh, the dentist.
Yeah, she was writing this movie with him about a dentist who becomes like a faith healer. And then she realized, why don't we just combine them? And, this sort of more outrageous comedy became a much more subdued, intricate piece. I feel like Touchy Feely is sort of the outlier in her filmography. I think a lot of people don't like it, or it didn't receive the raves that honestly, even when the stuff when not all of the pieces fit for me, the parts I think are really beautiful. I think some of the most beautiful stuff is in this movie. There's a scene where Rosemarie DeWitt takes an ecstasy and runs into an old lover, which, by the way, Lynn Shelton had in the original draft was going to make him not real. He was going to be a hallucination. That scene where she tells him about her first time is so beautiful, and as it turns out is word for word from Lynn Shelton's life. And I don't know, the movie is totally worth it for that scene, and the scene at the end when they're listening to the musician that gets healed by the dentist is also incredibly beautiful. I don't know. Also, another thing I discovered is I have the same musical taste as Lynn Shelton. all throughout all these films, I was like, yes, this is early 2000s emo, and I'm into it. But I don't know. How did you guys feel about Touchy Feely?
I was less enamored by it. I think this did remind me a little bit of the Christopher Guest reaction I got, not because of the improvisation, but just because there is some especially in this movie, there has to be some suspension of belief. I'm the whole thing with the dentist who becomes a faith healer and he's trying to tell all these people, he's I'm not a magician, I'm not healing your fucking jaws, TMJ, and they're no, oh my god, it's crazy. And there's just a lot of antics that happen to lead these people to their revelations. I thought Elliot Page's character randomly kind of falling for Rosemarie DeWitt's boyfriend was unnecessary.
Oh yeah, I didn't like that at all.
I was why? What purpose does this serve in a larger story? I didn't understand.
And I love both of them. I love Scoot McNairy. I love Elliot Page. But
his name's Scoot.
Yeah, Scoot.
Yeah.
They just didn't connect on that level either. So then it felt forced.
Well, I think I feel they shouldn't have connected, and that's he's denying him, but it's but why? What is the motivation for this dentist's daughter to suddenly want to make out with her? I don't know what the relationship. Her aunt, right? It would be her aunt. Her aunt's boyfriend. There is a lot. Allison Janney's character. Why is she making out with the dentist at the end? Right. What is? There was a lot here that I was okay. See, I did not know that it was 2 movies that got combined into one. And now I'm like, oh.
Now
so
it sort of makes more sense. Yeah.
There's a million fucking ideas here. And yeah. So.
Yeah, I think some of that outlier stuff kind of does muddle it. But like when you look at just you have a massage therapist who now has a complete aversion to touch, and a dentist who is probably one of the least liked doctors that everyone has to visit, has the magic touch. Those are 2 very interesting concepts and do pair well together. It's just some of that other stuff becomes super big background noise that kind of clouds it.
Give me a break.
What do you mean give you a break? Why didn't you send them?
It's a really bad time.
It's a great time.
It's not a great time.
Why?
We can barely pay Susan.
What does that mean?
What does it mean? It means that we haven't had a new client in forever, and all of Grandpa's clients are dying off.
Yeah, and that's not your problem.
Yeah, well, that's really easy for you to say.
Yeah, it is easy for me to say.
It's too like pretty and like too precise that it doesn't make sense, because at the end of like Your Sister's Sister, it's not precise, it's not pretty, it's like, you know, you see all the jagged edges, and in the end it's still okay and it's gonna be fine. Same thing happens at Hump Day. Like, it's not, you know, like a bow is put on it, and I feel like it, for whatever reason, Touchy Feely decided it needed to have that. It's weird.
Well, and there's also the problem that happens with a lot of like the non-structured filmmakers and like the mumblecore is like, so I enjoy like a Joe Swanberg film, but Digging with Fire has too many people in it. And it becomes this thing where it's like, oh, I just have to keep adding people that I want to play with into my films until all of a sudden I have like 18 different people who aren't actually doing anything for 90 minutes. And, you know, like Lynn Shelton never gets that bad, but like this one definitely felt like it was like, oh, I really do want to work with this person. Let me, like, when do you get to work with Allison Janney? When do you get to work with Elliot Page, especially after Juno and Whip It? Oh, great. You want to be in my film? Yeah, I will literally write you anything. So
yeah, fair.
Speaking of working with big actors, her next film, the film we've all been waiting for, 2014's Laggies, which was the first film that she actually didn't write for herself. She did just working as a director, starring Keira Knightley, Chloe Grace Moretz, of Tom and Jerry fame.
Yes.
2021's Tom and Jerry. And Sam Rockwell. We covered this film a little bit in the Sam Rockwell episode. The biggest thing that I learned this time around, I like this movie. I'm not shitting on it, but Anne Hathaway was supposed to, former subject Anne Hathaway was supposed to play the Keira Knightley role, and she had to back out. And they were not sold on Keira Knightley at first, and then she came in and like blew them away. And I do think she's particularly good in this movie. So, but yeah, Laggies.
It's so funny. Like, again, this, I didn't really catch this. It's so, I'm like, my train of thought's all over the place. But when I first saw this movie, I just thought like, oh, what a kind of kooky booky rom-com. Seeing it within the canon of Lynn Shelton, I'm truly just like, what the fuck is up with like her obsession with 30-year-olds who are just like fuck ups, who have like, you know, and even like in Hump Day, where the Duplass character, he's not a fuck up, he's like ashamed about it, like, and needs to like be less boring and less like, you know, I sold out. And in this movie, Keira Knightley's character is like, la 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 la, I again have this great relationship, don't want it. And all my friends, even though her friends are assholes.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it a great relationship? Because I will go out on a limb and say, I don't think Keira Knightley's a fuck up in this movie. I think she's painted as one because her friends are all like, we're getting married and we're doing it for the gram. And she's like, no thanks.
Well, maybe fuck up's too strong for her, but like it's just like Lynn has this obsession with like people who are like lost in
sort
the
of
wilderness.
Underachieving.
Very that.
I think so much of it is like existential ennui is not just for being 21 years old. Like that, it haunts you for forever.
Yeah,
and
that's a very good way to put it.
And I was sort of wanted to revisit some of the territory that I was exploring in that first film. And Laggy's kind of gave the opportunity, because there's a relationship between a 20-something woman and somebody in their teens. And in We Go Way Back, it was two selves. It was this 23-year-old woman and her actual 13-year-old self. And there's a little turn of magic realism, and they end up being physically together. And for a while, there was an idea that it would just be a proxy. It wouldn't be her actual 13-year-old self. It would be, a Chloe Moretz. It would be like a, some neighbor or cousin or somebody sort of came into her life and reminded her of herself or whatever. And Laggy's was sort of like, oh, this is like a whole other way that I could have made that first film. So I see those two, and there are connections between different films.
Laggy's is her only like fully scripted film. Like everything else had improv. This one she followed to the letter what was in the screenplay, but I mean, I love that she just kind of is like, hey, guess what? You become a little bit smarter and you give like a little bit less of a shit as you get older, but existence haunts you for forever. And so you have to learn to live with it.
Yeah. And you are going to get the guy.
Yes.
See, now I've come back, and I think Kira's character is a fuck up. Like, anyone who's hanging out with
I just talked you into it. Shit.
If you're hanging out with 4 high school kids and you're, like, about to be 30, like, that's a fuck up. Like, I'm sorry. It's, like...
True. And I'll give you that.
It's like,
I don't want to hang out with high school kids, so I'll give you that.
If you're an adult and, like, you have to make these decisions, like, it's one thing to, like, buy kids alcohol, which is bad. Don't do that. But, like... And then move on with your fucking life and be like, oh, wow, I see myself in that young girl. But then to be like, I want to escape my relationship that I don't think I like anymore. That's a normal thing. But to escape into a young girl's house and try and hide that from her father, that's fuck up moves, babe. I'm sorry.
Dad, you do know you can't lecture her all night, right? She's not a kid.
Oh, really? You snuck your friend into my house. I think you're lacking say-so here. If you let her spend the night in your locker, no, that's school's property. If you let her spend the night in your backpack, yes. No, that's... Actually, I paid for the backpack, so I guess that's my property. I don't know. Why don't you put a case together and come back?
So I will also say I love Caitlin Dever in this film so much.
Yeah.
I think she is
amazing.
the unsung hero of
Caitlin
Laggy's.
Dever, in general, underrated.
Yes, but I mean... Mark Webber asking her what was your spirit animal at your thing, and she goes, I'm my own animal, with just such a straight delivery.
Yeah. You just recently talked about this movie on your own podcast.
Yes.
And so I think it's funny, like, because I knew we probably aren't going to be able to get into as deep of conversation as you got into that, but I do appreciate how much you appreciate it, because I do like this movie.
I'll talk about Caitlin Dever just randomly doing shit for forever.
Same, I love that girl.
In 2015, she's invited by the Academy of Motion Pictures of Arts and Sciences, Oscars, into the director's branch of that, which is very cool and good for her. In 2017, her next film, her penultimate film, Outside In, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. This stars Jay Duplass, Edie Falco, Caitlin Dever, and Ben Schwartz. This was really her big foray into drama. I mean, I do think there are funny moments in this movie. This movie's certainly more sour than sweet, though, I would say. It's about Jay Duplass getting out of prison after having spent 20 years for committing murder, as you find out, possibly just taking the rap for a murder. And Edie Falco is his former high school teacher who stayed in contact with him the whole time and really was the impetus for him getting out. And he tries to adjust back into life, and also starts to kind of fall in love with Edie Falco, who is an adult woman in a loveless relationship, and her daughter is played by Caitlin Dever. Do want to mention how she's involved in the film. And yeah, I don't know. I found this really sweet, and also like brought up a lot of things I didn't think about, which is the fact that like if you spend 20 years in prison, you missed cell phones, basically.
Yeah. I love this movie a lot. I was like kind of surprised at all that empathy and like all that love that she like you were talking about, Morgan, like into this movie. I think also Edie Falco's such an incredible actress.
Oh my God, Edie Falco's amazing. Yeah,
I think Jay is probably the better actor of the Duplass brothers.
Also agree.
And yeah, I don't know. I think like it's pretty clear that Edie Falco is working essentially with this like justice project where she's getting people who are wrongfully convicted out. You kind of learn that they've fallen in love through their letter writing and her work for him, but also like that she's fallen in love with work. She's fallen in love with this work. She has a new passion. She's kind of not only finding herself this new partner, but finding like a new passion for her life where, you know, her husband's kind of a sad sack. Caitlin Dever as the daughter has kind of like separated herself from the family or is just not present. I just think Jay and Edie play it so well together, and this guy who's truly lost and doing his best and trying to also not just like blow up the world, you know, like he's like, fuck.
And it's funny too, because in a way he ends up playing the sort of, I mean, at this point, almost 40, and they bring that up a lot that he's almost 40, but he is sort of playing the like 30-year-old fuck up that, you know, she normally assigns to a character. And I think it's interesting to actually give a character a reason why he's sort of had this arrested development, which is that he's spent a majority of the time in which you really mature as a person locked behind bars. And so there's a great scene where they go out on a date and he like takes her to all the things you would do on a high school date. They go like bowling and to the arcade. And I don't know, I found it really charming and very sweet and quiet little film. I don't know, but I really enjoyed it.
Oh, she said, I'm making all these movies in Seattle, babe. There's
except for her last one.
Yeah, except for her last one. I just think it shows off a really different side of Washington State that you're not used to seeing in her movies.
Yeah, because it's a much more like rural, because she normally like films around Seattle. And so it felt much more rural, much more of like this tight-knit community that this person has to reintegrate themselves into. But I also particularly like Jay Duplass and Caitlin Dever together because it's almost like two mature enough to be functioning at a base level, but not mature enough to actually be functioning as full adults, like trying to swap, like, I don't quite understand how I'm supposed to figure this out. And it's very interesting watching him not have the answers for her because Lackeys was one of those films where it was like, look, I have answers for you. Take them or leave them. And this one was just kind of like, hey, I actually don't know. And it's, as you said, due to him not getting to live life during those years of maturity.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I hadn't thought about that, but like the parallel of Chloe Grace Moretz and Keira Knightley and then Caitlin Dever to Jay Duplass. And those, I mean, obviously, like in one, Caitlin Dever is kind of developing a little bit of a crush, but also like wanting to like live ahead of her years, in the same way that Chloe Grace is.
And that also then connects into her first film as well. We go way back, so it's an interesting sort of triple parallel. Is that a thing? Sounds like a swimming move.
Unintended trilogy.
An unintended trilogy. Her final film was 2019's Sort of Trust. It is a much more comedic, you know, it's back from that drama area. Premiered at South by Southwest. In the film, Cynthia, played by Jillian Bell, inherits a sword from her deceased grandfather, which she tries to sell as saying the South won the Civil War. This film also stars Mark Maron, John Bass, and Michaela Watkins. Jillian Bell and Michaela Watkins play a lesbian couple in it. They try and sell this sword to Mark Maron, who is a pawn shop dealer. And yeah, it's funny at moments.
I like this movie.
Oh, I didn't. I'll be honest. I didn't dislike it. And I may be giving it not enough credit. I will fucking watch Jillian Bell in anything. I think Jillian Bell is genuinely one of the most hilarious people working right now. There's a moment in this film where they're being held at gunpoint and she sneaks up behind a guy and just goes, "Surprise gun!" And it's the funniest thing to me. But yeah, my complaint about this movie is I didn't necessarily buy all the characters, and I thought it was a little too long for its own premise. But one actor that we didn't mention was that Lynn Shelton was in this film too. Yes. And I think that this might be like my favorite Lynn Shelton appearance in a movie. Like, she is just so sweet and tragic, and you love her from the minute that she's on screen. Yeah, I loved her in this. Yeah, I thought she was really great too. I will say, especially after last week and watching some very heavy Glenn Close movies about drug addiction, I was like, wow, Lynn Shelton looks great for supposedly being a drug addict, but that's comedy for you. That's but I agree. I do think she's particularly very good in this movie, and I like the very limited amount of screen time that she gets, but she does make a huge impact.
I just think this was I think this is her funniest movie. With the caveat, it's more traditionally funny. It's not situational. It's actually, I mean, even though the situation they are in is fucking ridiculous. But I also like that it's not punching down to I think it could very easily just be hillbillies are stupid and let's laugh at them. And it doesn't do that at all. And it kind of gives them even some you can just tell Lynn Shelton is talking. She's let's have this conversation about truth. And, it feels very of the time as well. Especially with just the media. And just inherent, Americans distrusting, history and distrusting, stuff like that. It feels honestly a very mature conversation about really? Is this what the fuck's going on? Yeah, I really liked it. And I think it's very funny, but also very sweet. I mean, I was kind of I was like, wow, they're in the back of this truck for a really long time and they're showing us all of it. But I think the payoff is really worth it because you get these people talking about themselves, and it goes back to what you were saying, Morgan. She actually does care about these people and is not let's have a silly movie about this sword that may or may not have been a relic that would prove that the South won the Civil War. It's about these real people and their real problems who have to deal with this very stupid situation.
Yeah, I also love Mark Maron's line where he sees that there's a market for memorabilia saying that the South won, and he's like, what is this, racist antique roadshow?
Yeah.
I think it's a very funny movie, and I do think that it was a good vehicle for her to work with Mark Maron, who she had just started a relationship with. I do want to move into her personal life real quick. She was married to actor Kevin Seal. They got married in 1993. They have one son together, Milo Seal, who is deaf. Mm-hmm. She loved being a mom, and I loved listening to her talk about being a mom. On May 16th, 2020, Lynn Shelton died of acute myeloid leukemia in Los Angeles. At the time, she had her and her husband had divorced in 2019, and she was with Mark Maron. He said that she had spent several days of ill health. Obviously, this was during COVID. It's May 16th of this last year, and so people worried that it was COVID. It was not COVID. Essentially, it's rapid growth of abnormal cells that build up in your bone marrow and blood, and it interferes with normal blood cell production. It has been said if the doctors had caught it in time, there's a good chance Lynn Shelton would have survived. But unfortunately, she was not diagnosed with it. And, that's
tragic. Really is
incredibly tragic. As we mentioned up front, she is a prolific TV film director. She worked on Mad Men, New Girl, Mindy Project, Master of None, Mark Maron's stand-up comedy special Too Real, which, by the way, he had to tell Netflix that he wouldn't do it if they didn't let her direct it, because they were like, she's never directed a comedy show, and he's like, she's done 7 films. Like, if you want me, you're gonna take her, and she's gonna do it. She'd worked on Apple TV's Dickinson and The Morning Show, and actually the last thing that she had been working on that was completed was she was an executive producer on the TV show, the Hulu TV show Little Fires Everywhere, with Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. I tried for this show. It's not for me, but
I'm not one of those girls either. I didn't even try. I was like, I didn't even watch whatever the HBO thing everyone loves. I'm not
Mare for me. Yeah, that's not me either. But this specifically, I was like, oh well, she directed the first and 4th episode. I was like, I can do at least the first 4 episodes, so I can see how much her influence. I do think her influence in terms of directing style is there, but boy, oh boy, did this feel like a bad beach read. I was like, and honestly, like, I love Reese, and Kerry Washington is amazing in it. Kerry Washington steals every scene that she's in, but Reese was like, I don't know. She felt like she was in another thing. She felt like she was like, I know I've met women like the woman she's trying to portray, and they are not cartoons. They're very scary and very real. And she kept playing it like, I'm just going to twirl my mustache and be as Karen as possible. So
a villainess.
Yeah. She actually, she directed half of that miniseries and was nominated for an Emmy for her work. She was nominated posthumously, and it's really her only major award win at any kind of.
Which is bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she also worked on Glow with Mark Maron. She shot there what ended up being the series finale. Still very bitter about it, but I mean,
as you should be. Glow is great, and I did really like Glow.
And she Alison Brie talked about when she directed her episode of Glow that she tried to bring in her Lynn energy. So
love that. Well, speaking of Lynn energy, why don't we get into our picks and really get into that Lynn energy? Let's do the hard work first, and let's talk about our 1-star reviews. Morgan, darling, guest of honor, we're going to kick it to you first.
I will say, I don't think any of these films technically count as a 1-star, but my lowest rated film would be My Effortless Brilliance. I just think that I don't understand straight men very well, just tragically attracted to them. So that's fun. Yeah, and it's also the last film of hers that I watched. And so I think having a body of works expectation also kind of tainted that.
Surprise! Well, do you want to come in or you want to keep sitting in Pine Sap?
Here's to everything being good again.
I totally get it. It's not the world's easiest watch. It's certainly this is going to sound very mean, especially since I'm talking about somebody who has passed away. It's her ugliest film. I mean, the fact that it was shot on video is like rough stuff. Like it's not pleasant to watch. I mean, it's a lot of close-ups. It's a lot of super handheld, and I can't always get behind that. It has to be very motivated for me.
At the end of the movie, when the guy's leaving, and he's like, next time, why don't you let me know you're coming over, or you can park. He tells him some sort of invitation. I was like, bitch, you tell him next time, don't fucking come. Like, there's no way at the end of this movie, he's like, you know what, friend, bestie. Like, no.
Yeah, this is the last time. This was their breakup.
Like, thank you for coming. Don't do it again. The end.
The end. I don't hate this movie, but I can see where you're coming from.
Again, I don't think that there is a bad Lynn Shelton film. I just think that is my lowest rated Lynn Shelton film.
Oh,
again,
well,
she's my favorite.
I'm gonna come in hot then.
Oh boy.
Let's hear it, Gavin. Let's hear it.
I hate Hump Day. I've hated it since the first time I saw it. I really don't like it. It's a very frustrating film for me because it is the closest to like a traditional mumblecore film. I don't understand why it has to be a movie. I watch it and I'm just like, I don't get it. And like, I think there's interesting stuff in it. I think the scene in which Mark Duplass sits down with his wife and tells her that like maybe deep down there's something, you know, possibly queer about him. There's something maybe gay, that maybe there's like an experience he'd like to have that getting married has robbed him of, and he'd like, this is maybe his last chance to experience it. But like, yeah, but none of that has anything to do with it. It's a lie. It's a front. It has nothing to do. And so then it just becomes this
also
story.
Like, sorry, but like that also just sounds like Mark Duplass like reaching for the fucking stars.
Right.
Like
he's like, it's my Meryl moment.
But also, like, you just know, you know, if there was no script for that and he knows he has to get somewhere, he's trying to, like, navigate the course to get to, like, yes, beautiful wife who I want to have kids with. This is why I want to have sex with this man. And also, I just have to say, well, number one, this was also my pick for 1-star review. But...
I thought it might be, and so, but I'm glad you let me go.
But if there were 2 straight men out there in the universe who were like, hey, let's have a bone sesh, they would not walk into the room being like absolutely unprepared. Someone would know that they are being the top, and someone would know that they're being the bottom. Yeah. It would not be a situation to like, we'll see, we'll figure it out. Like, no. Like, especially if these guys are as, like, no pun intended, anal as they are in the movie. Like, if you know, Mark Duplass is very, like, I need to do this thing, blah, blah. Like, they would have done some Googling. They would have, you know, figured out who was doing what.
Well, that's the part that killed me, is that also it's a film from 2009. I get it. If this is, like, maybe a film from the 80s, and they're like, oh, 2 guys, that's gonna make it art. 2 straight guys. And it's like, no, that's literally the basis for 90% of gay porn. And I know you probably don't know that, Morgan, but we're here to tell you it is.
Well, I mean, they obviously could have just asked Jeeves.
Yes, they could have just asked Jeeves. It's funny because like the extent of their planning was like, well, maybe I'll go like jerk off and get like hard, and then it's like run in and do it. And I was like, huh. That's
like,
how
have you ever done that with a woman? Because that's not how that works.
I was like, it's, yeah. And again, I just keep coming back to like, for what? Because you think you're uncool. Your fucking friend isn't cool.
Right.
But
the funny thing is the 2 women they meet that they initially create this bet over that they're gonna make this art porn film for the stranger are the cool people in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite scene in the film is when Joshua Leonard is with them and Lynn Shelton playing is like, no, we're not, no dick tonight. Like, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
I'm with my girlfriend, and he like can't hang all of a sudden.
Look, let's try maybe for tonight using my machinery. See how it goes, and if all parties aren't satisfied, then we can bring.
That's just not how it goes. It's just not how it goes. Honey. It's not. I'm sorry.
All right. No. Yeah.
Aww.
No. It's cool.
You really don't have to be threatened.
Yeah. No. It's cool. Oh. It's cool. I'm just. Yeah.
I'm really disappointed.
Yeah, me too.
It doesn't.
No, I'm sorry. I'm such a fucking square.
The maybe like ultimate meta joke about all of this, and maybe we are just like being trolled by Lynn Shelton with this movie, is because at the end, they both are like, what exactly makes this art?
Yeah.
Why is this art? Because it's 2 straight guys fucking in this porn. Like, what does that? And literally, I'm like, why is this movie art? Like, what? Like, why is any art art? Like, if there's one kernel of like something that I take away from this is that like, why the fuck is this dumb shit something I need to see?
I will say she did mention that in 2012 it was remade in France as like a big budget, like $4 million film.
Stop.
Called Do Not Disturb. And it was directed by, I'm going to fuck this up, but Yan Attell. But I think what is the best compliment to her is Charlotte Gainsborough played Lynn Shelton's role, and Asia Argento played her girlfriend. And I was just like, wow, they really just were just like passing that budget around. This first one, it's funny because I saw various interviews with her where people asked her about it, and some of them she was very like, I prefer mine, you know, and then other versions of it, she was like, oh yeah, it's awful, and it's very much directed by a man.
Well, I imagine some French person was like, this will make money.
She gave a great example is that the opening of Hump Day is him and his wife in bed together, and then they are both kind of like, I don't really want to do this. Like they start to initiate sex. And apparently the opening of Do Not Disturb is like a full on like sex scene, like a raging sex scene. And she's like, that should tell you everything you need to know about the French remake. So there is a worse version of this movie out there, and it actually exists. But yeah, since we're on the subject, was there anything else that you guys saw that you didn't particularly like?
I think Touchy Feely is the only other one that for me, like...
It's funny because you said earlier, you were like, well, I wasn't as enamored as you. I didn't mean to make it sound like I was enamored. I like a handful of scenes, but I agree. Touchy Feely would have to be my other... It's not a 1-star movie. It's more towards the middle of the road for me, but it's definitely one that I was less... Even though I do love Rosemary DeWitt, and I would watch her do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also just think, like, you know, we go way back, and My Effortless Brilliance... Even though there are some things there that I like appreciate, like I think We Go Way Back has a lot of like interesting things.
Yeah, I would never include We Go Way Back in this section. I loved We Go Way Back.
I just don't want to like. Some of these were work. Okay, like watching, like My Effortless Brilliance was like, you know, like, oh god, they're just not easy watches for me.
For me. To me, to Misha Iman.
And I'm coming for you.
Morgan, is there anything else, or do you just want to leave it at?
I was going to say a Hump Day would kind of just be my other one that's like low tier, kind of as what you said. I do love the fact that she probably was trolling us about toxic masculinity and straight guys. So, you know, always props for that.
Since we got through our 1-star reviews, let's move into a much more positive area, and let's talk about our 5-star reviews. So Morgan, as our guest, we are also going to make you go again for 5-star reviews.
Right. So very difficult because, again, my favorite filmmaker. But I'm going to go with Your Sister's Sister. I think not only is it a brilliant film with some really great performances, but it just kind of has a lovely nostalgia to it of every time I watch it, it feels like I'm watching it for the first time again. And there's that same magical buzz. Because I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes Lynn Shelton so special too, is that she really makes filmmaking feel possible for any and everyone. And I think Your Sister's Sister was kind of like one of the first films that I watched that I was like, if you put your mind to it, yeah, you can do that thing. So that's my pick.
I really thought you were going to pick Laggies. So, I mean, and this is the thing, as I mentioned every episode, we don't talk about our picks beforehand because we want them all to be fresh and we want them to be surprising to each other. I have to agree with you. Your Sister's Sister is my favorite Lynn Shelton movie as well. I think there's something really beautiful about it. I think there's something really beautiful about the interaction between the characters. I don't know if I could have put it better. It truly does feel like watching it for the first time every time you see it. And I think there's a spontaneity to it that is just refreshing, and these characters feel very real, and I don't know. I like watching this movie. I think it's very funny. I think it's well acted. As I said before, the relationship between Emily Blunt and Rosemary DeWitt is so well crafted, and I genuinely, and I know Rachel Weisz would be amazing. We did an entire episode on her. It's actually our most popular episode. I can't imagine anybody but Rosemary DeWitt doing this. Yeah. So, yeah, I have to agree. Your Sister's Sister, 5-star movie.
The funny thing, though, about those years when he was so bad with the ladies, he was so good with us because that was...
He wasn't.
No, but that was like 6 summers. That was just the 3 of us here.
I know, but you were okay with it. I had no respect for that. He dodged from one to the other and it was gross.
That's so crazy. So he would just like date all these women like for short periods of time with not a lot of emotional
Yeah, it
investment,
was
and
horrible.
they were very similar, and then he would just move on?
Yeah.
God, that's just weird. Who does that? Oh! And the patterns emerge!
What are you doing?
I'm sorry. Skinny jeans George. Skinny jeans Harry. Skinny jeans Vinny. Vinny lasted for at least 2 weeks. He was one of the longer
I
ones.
don't like dating. You know that. I don't like dating. I
No,
don't like the
I think
romance in it. I don't
technically
like it.
this
I get
is-
bored. I don't like it.
My pick is a little crazy, cuckoo, but I just really was touched weirdly by Sword of Trust.
It's a great pick. I debated that one too.
I thought you were going to go with Outside In, so hey.
I just, she's and maybe I didn't even know this until we started talking and you said it, Morgan, like she does have that way of being kind and empathetic and like getting the humanity of really fucking normal people in ways that like if anyone else had made this movie, they would have made Mark Maron like the liberal country bumpkin who like, and just like to be able to, at the moment where they're like, where are you from? And he's like, Phoenix? Like, it's like, people are from boring places and sound all sorts of ways. And you can, like, but on top of that, even giving, like, the backstory to these, like, who would be the white racist guys, for him to have that moment being like, hey, I remember you, and I remember your mom and dad. Why did you turn out like your dad who was an asshole? Like, she is even going out of her way to make the, quote, bad guys human. And I also just love just like the effortlessness and the ease of this story that is so fucking ridiculous. But like, yeah, this lesbian niece and her partner are like, and just maybe people don't know, they go to a will reading and they think they're getting this house and they're like, LOL, I think the fuck not. Here's what your grandfather left for you. It's a sword. And with the sword, there are pages and pages of a story where the grandfather alleges that this sword is from some fucking obscure battle, and proves that the South has won or did actually win the Civil War. They discover that there's a big market for selling this. So they want to make a lot of money by selling it to Mark Maron at this pawn shop. Mark Maron's like, fuck off. Then he realizes you can buy people like there are crazy racists, truth deniers who are looking for evidence that the South actually won this war. And I think that's maybe what hit me the most. They are willing to compromise their beliefs and compromise what they know to be the truth just because we are at this place in society where like I need like the $4,000 that I would get from this sale or whatever it is. And they are willing to push themselves to the limits of what they believe in just to like kind of survive. And through this like kind of misadventure they go on to sell this thing, there's lots of laughs, but also lots of heart. As we mentioned, Lynn Shelton's character is an addict who kind of has broken the heart of Mark Maron's character. And I think like the ability to pull off the ending of this movie where, you think the big climax is like selling of the sword. But to me, it's like him actually giving Lynn Shelton's character maybe not another shot, but like a lifeline. Like, I haven't given up on you yet. I don't know. This movie does a lot of things. And I was just like kind of shook. Like, wow, there's genuine heartfelt drama here, but also genuine like surprise gun and like stupid funny things that made me laugh out loud
every time.
Yeah.
That film, I saw it played in one theater in my area. Went and saw it for my birthday.
Yes.
And I remember leaving going like, oh my gosh, like this is like the same feeling I felt watching Your Sister. Like it's magic in a bottle. It's cinema.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what she does next. And I think that that's kind of what made her passing even more tragic because she was really setting herself up for more spectacular things.
That's exactly what I was thinking as well. I was like, my God, she is taking, because I do think there's a lot of like, she was consuming the news, seeing the world around us and being like, God, we don't even believe in like truth anymore, like facts anymore. And she was able to tell that story in such a clever, funny way. And again, not in a, you know, like preachy way. She's not like, you know, judging, you know, these people in the movie. It's all kind of like, we're all normal humans and we're just trying to like navigate this fucked up world together. But yeah, I agree completely. I was like, man, if this was, is this her like 8th movie? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies. Like, she was already so good first go, and then now and this, and what seemed like what was going to be a very fruitful relationship with Marc Maron, not only romantically but creatively.
Yeah.
It's just it's beyond tragic that we lost her so soon. But that's my 5-star review for Sword of Trust.
Listen. Can I just ask you one question?
What?
Why didn't you just tell me from the beginning that you're both full of shit? I mean, you couldn't even keep the story straight. You don't believe any of this shit. If you're gonna run a con, at least get the lie straight.
What
It
inconsistency?
didn't even make sense. 15,000, 30,000. He's a general now? A general?
Okay.
Wasn't he a field marshal before?
Okay, you know
I mean, what the fuck?
It's very hard
Doesn't
to
make any
navigate
sense. From the beginning, it's just
Listen.
like you're sitting there doing sign language, she's making up shit.
We don't believe it. We don't believe it.
Honey.
Is your grandfather real?
Yes, my grandfather is real.
So let's just be on the same page. We're just trying to sell this thing for a lot of money. You don't believe this shit, and that's that.
Is there anything else we want to talk about that we think needs a shout out?
I know you're not the world's biggest fan of it, but I really do love We Go Way Back. I think it shows both a confidence and an effortlessness that most people never achieve in their first 5 movies, and I'm genuinely impressed with
An effortless brilliance.
That truly that she had, and I don't know. I think first movies are hard, man, and I think she nailed it right off the bat, and it's no surprise to me that she became as successful as she was, and obviously could have been much more successful, but like just sheer talent on screen.
Yeah. I think if you want like an easy introduction, like Outside In is on Netflix. And it's a lot more, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but like it's a more traditionally shaped movie than like We Go Way Back or My Effortless Brilliance, even Hump Day. You know, it's a little bit more mainstream, but it's still her like shining, I think, at her full strength. Great. Should we do our mixed reviews review?
Sure thing. So my 1-star review was 2009's Hump Day.
That was also mine.
And my 1-star review was 2008's My Effortless Brilliance.
And my 5-star review, which was also Morgan's 5-star review, is 2011's Your Sister's Sister.
My 5-star review was 2019's Sword of Trust. Excellent. Let's get into the fast forward.
As we mentioned, unfortunately, Lynn Shelton has passed away, but in 2020, Northwest Film Forum and the Duplass Brothers Productions launched the Lynn Shelton of a Certain Age grant. It's a $25,000 unrestricted cash grant that supports a woman or a non-binary U.S.-based filmmaker aged 39 or older who is yet to direct a narrative feature. The grant's details are inspired by Shelton's own path as a filmmaker.
I definitely feel like, certainly in television, which is sort of where I've most intersected with Hollywood, I've seen more and more women on the rosters of directors instead of me being the only one who's, a female on some roster. And so it feels like it's definitely, there's more opportunities, but I think there's still a long way to go, honestly. But yeah, it seems like at least there's some awareness on some showrunners' parts to make sure that there's gender parity.
I think that's really, really great. There's been a couple really amazing tributes to her. In August 2020, the American Cinematheque hosted an online tribute that featured, Gillian Jacobs, Kerry Washington, Reese Witherspoon. There's a very beautiful video that's on Vimeo and YouTube called Her Effortless Brilliance. That is a tribute to Lynn Shelton. If you want to see a bunch of people that truly loved working with her and loved her in general talk about her life, it's very much worth a watch. I love to end episodes with somebody if it's an actor, usually them singing, and if it's a director, usually a piece of music from their films that means something. That tribute actually ends with her singing a song with a band, and so I will play that even though she's harmonizing. Normally I like to keep it just to the person, but I think it's really beautiful. And so, there's all of that. Plus, at the time of her death, she was working with Marc Maron on a script for a new movie that was going to be a dramatic turn, and people have asked Marc Maron if he would go on and take that, because he said that they really only had the ending to rewrite, if he would rewrite the ending and let another female filmmaker do it. I think that's a really rude question to ask somebody who's currently grieving. I mean, she's just passed away last year. Don't do that. I know people want to know that stuff, but
if we get that film ever made, I think it'll be such a gift, but also her path was always unconventional and, surprising. And so maybe later we will, and it'll be as unconventional and surprising as she always has been. But truly, I think we're just very, lucky to have these kind of kooky, funny, weird films that aren't marching to the same beat of everything else that you got going on. And it's also just telling, she worked with Rosemary DeWitt so much, the Duplass brothers, she was building this community of artists, and it just reminds me that really was the first thing in her mind, like I mentioned, just doing this art. And I was reading about her making Sword of Trust, and there's one of my favorite scenes is them in the back of this truck, and she was that was literally all just practical. I had to do that because we didn't have the money or the resources to film them in a car. And so I was if we have a windowless van to put them in, literally the assistant DPs can just be outside shaking the truck to make it seem like they're moving and just filming it like that. And I think she liked it like that. I think she preferred that. And I think, it's so special to have this scholarship or grant in her name, just because it just continues her to being able to touch all these people in the industry and their work. God, when she passed away, I remember this the outpouring of love and the outpouring of this. Because like you said, Morgan, even something that was already hot and fresh out the kitchen, season 4 of Mad Men, to still be able to walk in there and make an impression and move someone like John Hamm to having even just a fucking great day at work. That's special. She was really special.
Yeah, I think Marc Maron said it best. No one has a mean thing to say about Lynn Shelton.
Mm-hmm. All these movies feel so intimate to her. They never feel precious to me, Yeah. It feels it just feels very generous. It feels very out to the community. Yeah. Do you think I don't know that I've seen a lot of movies, and it could be just my ignorance, that feel like Lynn's movies. Do you guys happen to know of anyone that
I think there's things that of similar vein, and maybe you could say of similar style, but I don't know if she had her own thing. Yeah. She had her own feeling. That's why I sort of resist when people talk about her in terms of mumblecore. I think there's maybe, Hump Day is as close as you get to her heading towards mumblecore. And she brought up Dogma 95 when she was talking about My Effortless Brilliance. And so she's worked in all these sorts of areas, but I think you so clearly see her thread through them that, I don't know. I don't think there's anyone like her. I don't know if there will ever be anyone quite like her. She's fascinating in the way that she works. And I could name filmmakers who do similar things. I could name drop my favorite, Robert Altman, and be she's doing that, but also she's not, because she's doing a very personal version of it. She doesn't care about as many people talking over each other as much as he does. And I don't know. So I think that there's something unique and something that we certainly lost without her. And I mentioned before, she's turned down roles. She was offered Black Widow. And she, like, I get it because, she, you know, I think in her brain, she's like, if I'm going to work for somebody that's completely in control, I'm going to do TV. Like, I'm not going to do $100 million or $200 million movie that somebody else is essentially making and just slapping my name on.
Right.
Like,
What would a part of me is like, what would a Lynn Shelton Black Widow look like? But it would look like a Marvel movie. And
yeah, exactly.
There's no way Marvel would be like, okay, yeah, go just like make a script on day one.
But that's like, and I don't like, I feel bad because I don't want to shit on Kate Shortland, who is a filmmaker I really like. And I watch Kate Shortland movies and I also think like, why, what? But it's going to look like a Marvel movie. And so that's why, and I think that's why Lynn Shelton's like, she was never interested in that stuff.
Right.
And she's like, no, I'm going to make the movies I want to make and I'm going to make them my way. And that's what they're going to look like. And she's like, if you want me to do something that's more in line with somebody else's vision, I'll go do TV and I'll make my money that way.
Yeah. And what I also find really interesting is Edgar Wright was such a huge fan of her work. And, you know, he is one of the most technical filmmakers out there. And I think that there's just kind of an appreciation for her ability to just be like, let's live in the moment. And you can't live in the moment, you know, as you're
choreographing.
Choreographing stuff and like
space lasers and
speeding down a random European street with like people following you. Like that's so much more, that's so technical. And I think that she kind of, again, like balanced this is my exact vision and here are the organic pieces to that art. And yeah, you don't get that in Marvel. And I also think in television, she directed a lot of pilots. She did Fresh Off the Boat and The Love pilot as well. And I mean, the creator of Fresh Off the Boat, the person whose life is basically what that TV show is based off of, you know, she was like, what are the things that are the most important that I need to get? And she would make those things happen. Or on Love, there's a sex scene in the first episode. And she was like, we need to talk about what is your comfort level? What makes you feel safe? Because we're not going to make this unless you feel safe doing it.
Right.
And, you know, she always said that she loved actors. And you can't act in a Marvel film most of the time because you're just like running, you're doing a lot of cardio. And
wow, shots fired, Morgan. We're not acting, we're cardioing.
Look, there are some scenes of acting, there's a lot of cardio in between.
Yeah.
And so I just, you know, that's why she would never do anything like that, because she wanted to hang out with actors and be like, what's in your weird brain? Here's what's in mine.
It's also hard to hang out with actors when it's like one actor and then the rest are like brooms with eyes glued to them that have been painted green. So
There's that too.
So yeah.
I mean, you can talk with them, but it's a very one-sided conversation.
It's not great. No one ever wants to go out for drinks with them. But I do think that wraps up Lynn Shelton. I think she was absolutely one of a kind and sorely missed. And I don't know if we'll ever see the likes of her again. I mean, I'm hopeful we'll see a new class of filmmakers who come out of this who, you know, have a lot of really deep things to say and whatnot.
I mean, I hope we see more middle-aged women who saw Lynn Shelton's movies and were inspired the way she was by Claire Denis. And, you know, whether through this grant in her name or not, whatever, are making their weird little films. And I hope she truly has, like, you know, continued blazing that fucking trail, because she was a trailblazer.
Absolutely. So, Morgan, since we're wrapping up Lynn, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we can find you online? This is your moment to plug your stuff. Tell us about anything that you're doing or any place that we can find you.
Well, the best place to find me is on the @CinemaGals Twitter. That's for the podcast that I have with a mutual friend, Chels, called the Untitled Cinema Gals Project.
It's a great podcast. I'm a big fan.
Thank you so much for listening. It is just two chaotic Leos existing in the world. You can always tell when I am kind of taking control because I talk a lot about how Vanessa Kirby was robbed of her Oscar this year and a lot of Greta Gerwig gifts. So that's my thing.
Take that, Frances McDormand. And your third Oscar.
Not sorry.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, honestly, again, for bringing us Lynn Shelton. She was such an amazing subject and so great to really be able to deep dive into her film and be able to study her sort of closely for 2 weeks. And it certainly gave me a new appreciation for her.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for letting me fail your plans and let me talk about my favorite filmmaker.
But if you do want to contact us, you can always find us on Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
We're also on Facebook. Just type in The Mixed Reviews.
If you want to write us, you can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
We're also on Instagram. Just type in _mixed_reviews.
And if you want to continue listening to us, you can subscribe to us on a plethora of podcast apps. We're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and pretty much any place that you can find us. And if you could do us a huge favor, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and a little review. We'll read it on the show. We promise. We love hearing from you.
We love hearing you and your siren calls from the sea. Thank you guys for listening. Go to Redbubble. Check out our new hot Pride merch. And I guess, Gavin, we'll see the gals and everyone. Thanks, Morgan, so much for coming by. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Bye.
My love is a giver. She offers up the light I don't see. Her soul makes me shiver. She chases